Timbers 360 is presented by Toyota. Welcome to a special edition of Timbers 360. This week, the whole episode is going to be an interview with Timbers General Manager Ned Grabavoy. We're going to discuss the 2024 season, the highs and the lows. We'll look ahead to an important offseason. We'll address some of the pertinent topics around the club as well. Ned, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me and looking forward to it.
Let's start big picture. The season ended, obviously not in the fashion that you wanted, and there were real high highs, and there were, of course, some low lows in the season. As you've now had a few weeks to kind of sit back and assess holistically, how do you feel about how 2024 went for the Portland Timbers?
Yeah, I think now that we've had, multiple weeks, to sort of let the emotions settle of what was an extremely disappointing way to end the season. There's no way to sugarcoat that, to lose a game at home in that fashion when we felt like we were hopefully building momentum, and could really start to make a push in the playoffs. That moment was a real low, for us. And it did in some ways, at least in the moment, it felt like it took quite a bit away from a season in which we did feel like there was some progress and there were some real positives for us to build on as a club, especially in bringing Phil in, during his first season. I think we've had time to reflect as a staff, look at what went well, what didn't go so well, and in some ways the sport at times can be incredibly humbling. And if anything, it was a reality check for us that even though we feel like we're heading in the right direction, even though there are some positives to build on, there's still a lot more that we need to do.
Let's talk about the positives. The attack was incredible. Goals galore for most of the season, particularly here at Providence Park. How do you build on that attack? And are there other positives, you mentioned things to build on, that you're going to use as kind of tenets and tent poles moving forward to 2025?
Yeah, I think that you touched on one area I think that I'm proud of in terms of the staff implementing more of a style of play in a way that we want to look, especially at home. I'm a big believer that we have one of the best environments in all of MLS. We need to try to play in the front foot. It is an entertainment business as well. We want to excite, and we want to have fans excited to show up to Providence Park to see the team play, to score goals, to look dangerous, and to see a team that's exciting. I think we also have to look at the flip side going into next season, even though we've got an attack that performed at a very high level with some of the output, that may also be a challenge for us to continue to match going forward. It was probably one of the stronger attacks, within the league. So I think we've got to find a bit more balance, in the way that we play at times as well. I think we can maybe be a little bit more pragmatic at certain times, depending on some of the opponents that we play. But nonetheless, I felt like, and I think a lot of others felt, the energy to really, really be back in the building. There to be an excitement and a belief as a club and as a fan base and supporters group that we were sort of, kind of putting that back into the team in a lot of ways. And there's a number of moments for me last season that really stand out in terms of especially playing here at Providence Park.
What are those? When you think back, like what are those goosebump moments from this past season?
The most recent one was the Galaxy game, and I think this team, and I think fans have seen it as well. There's times when we have to maybe face the best teams in MLS and some of the biggest and most dangerous opponents, we have an ability to rise to the top and to show that we're very capable of competing with some of these teams, whether it's an LAFC, whether it's an LA Galaxy, who sort of stood out and maybe separated themselves in the Western Conference this year. There were some other games, when we played Nashville at home, when you saw moments of the team where within 15, 20 minutes, they could go and completely just take the game and sort of end it in a number of ways. Having said that, we've got to be better on the road. We've got to find an ability to win more games on the road, even though I think our performances, overall were better. But we've got to find a way to also pick up more points on the road so that there's not as much pressure, to constantly have to win every single game at home as well.
The flip side, a lot of goals conceded, right? I think that's fair to say. As you guys have assessed that aspect of this past season, where could that have been improved on the defensive side?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because I think you can look at it a number of different ways. I'm one that doesn't just look at, let's take one defender out and put a different defender in. For me, that there's risks that you have to take in a soccer match. We do try and attack. We do try and go and score goals, and it does leave our team at times, a little bit susceptible to what can come the other way. But looking at the goal differential, compared to years past as well, there's some positives to point on. We've got to be a little bit better with the ball. I think we've saw good progress in those areas to where hopefully we're moving at least more towards the middle of the pack in the league of how we use the ball and not giving away the ball cheaply. I believe it's a combination of things as well. But ultimately, if we are going to play that way and we are going to try to put the attacking group in a position to succeed and score goals and help us win games, I do think we have to look at the types of defenders and the types of players that we have around and who are the best players suited to play in that style as well.
Timbers 360 is presented by Toyota. About a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I was sitting right here with Phil Neville. He had just been announced as the head coach of the Portland Timbers. How, from your view and your vantage point, what has Phil built in his first year as a head coach with the Portland Timbers?
Yeah, I'm very content with Phil's first year. And we speak about Phil, but I believe we had maybe 7 other staff that were integrated into the club. I felt like in a very positive way. You look at that number, that's almost maybe a third of your staff. So I felt like we've added some experience. I think there's been healthy change to our group as a whole. And with Phil being in that head coaching role and that leadership role, I'm very happy with the work that he's done both with staff, both with players. A big reason, for us hiring Phil was we felt like he could also help create and shape and mold, the culture that we ultimately want. That is a continued word that you will hear really anywhere. It's a big part of any soccer club, and I think we have to continue to build on some of the blocks that have been put in place in the first year. Even though it's difficult to end a season the way that we did, to be knocked out of the playoffs, to not be able to make a further run, you've got to pick up the pieces, you've got to get back to it, you've got to put your head down, you've got to work. That's all I've ever known. I think that's all Phil's ever known as well. In a lot of ways, I think we're excited to work through the offseason, and hopefully months from now as we get into preseason, that excitement will start to build again with some more of the change that you'll see.
Where is the focus of that work this offseason? A big one, and every offseason is big for every club, right? Except the ones that win championships and run it back, right? Yeah. So where are you focusing that work over the next few months to strengthen this team for 2025?
However you lose the season, if you don't make the playoffs, you make the playoffs, you get knocked out, you're going to have to go through the offseason. And as I've connected with more general managers and sporting directors throughout the league, you realize that everybody has a lot to do. It's just different at different places, right? I think for us, when you look at our group and you look at our team, we have had a roster that's been in transition, over the last couple of years. I think we've got some good players that have also been here for a number of years that might also need a change of scenery. And I think some players have been open about that. I think we've been open about that as well, to try to freshen up the group, to bring in some new players, to bring in a different mentality. That time is probably now to look at a few of those moves from our roster to make space to bring some of those new players in. I think, I've been open about some of the areas that we'll look at this offseason. We are going to continue to assess and reassess the back line, and that's sort of in every spot, not just the individual players, but some of the pairings that we have as we head into next season. I think the center of midfield is a position, that we ultimately need to look to strengthen. And then with some of the new roster initiatives that are coming out, we do have an ability to potentially go and add another young player, with some real quality, which we've identified as potentially looking to use maybe along the front line and at center forward.
You mentioned the roster mechanisms, and this will be the first offseason with the new kind of dual roster pathways in MLS. And for those that don't know, every team can essentially choose to either have 3 designated players and 3 under 22 initiative players, or 2 designated players, 4 under 22 initiative players, and $2 million of general allocation money. And it's a pathway that has to be chosen by each team, which way they're going to go. How do you make that choice? And how does that change your job as the general manager of the Timbers trying to build this roster?
Yeah, and we may have just lost half our viewership trying to walk through
Right, exactly.
those
This is for the nerds,
those
for the MLS
initiatives.
nerds,
But
yes.
it's interesting, right? Because the league has come up with this, and it's really given general managers and sporting directors, I think, the ability to take steps forward going into an off season without having to take one or two steps back first to figure those things out. The amount of time I've been here, we're constantly trying to figure out how to be compliant, how to make things work within the cap. And at least with some of these new initiatives, I believe we at least have the ability to strengthen the team regardless of maybe some of the other moves that we make, or not have to wait on some of those other moves before going out and acquiring some of the players that we believe can ultimately drive that level, to a higher standard. I think with our current dynamic that we have and our current group that we have, it makes a lot more sense to shift towards a 2DP and a 4U22 model with the additional amounts of general allocation money. That's one that we're focused on, right now as we head into next season. I do think we're a club, when you look throughout the league, I think we've done very well in the U22 space. It's not always easy to bring in young players, have them settle, and then ultimately hope that they lead to being contributing players for the team. But I think we've done that quite well. We'll look to continue to do that, when opportunities arise.
When it comes to kind of roster building, the MLS Players Association, the union, always puts out their salary charts every year. And how much of a picture, of an accurate picture and a fair picture, does that paint? Particularly, I'm thinking of looking at the clubs that spend the most and spend the least, and that varies and can fluctuate every year. So from your perspective, is it fair to kind of judge teams based on where they sit in those rankings, so to speak?
Well, I think it depends on the conversation, right? It's accurate from a sense of just looking at numbers, how they want to look at numbers. But when you talk about spend, you've got to talk about salaries. You have to talk about discretionary spend. You have to talk about some of these things, right, that come along with DP spend and U22 spend. So I think when you look at total spend, in terms of some of the salary charts that you may see, Portland's not in that spot. We probably sit much higher up. But I also think you have a league in which it's so close with the spend, with the salary spend, because you still do have a salary cap. You still do have allocation amounts that you have to work within. And I think you can see these huge swings of 15, 20 spots one year to the next year, and that could be based off just one signing. So the difference of a new signing, a new DP signing, it can quickly swing you from, 23rd, 24th, in that salary ranking to potentially being, closer to the top 10. Like I said, it's so close. It probably doesn't mirror what you see in other sports where you have some of the big gaps in salary spend. And I say as well, some of the spending is cyclical in this league. It goes every 2 or 3 years, and those teams, will move places quite a bit.
Timbers 360 is presented by Toyota. I think maybe the topic most on the mind of Timber supporters and even those around MLS is Evander. Of course, very public contract negotiations, to say the least, became public after the final game of the season. Where do things stand right now with Evander?
Yeah, well, obviously we had a press conference at the end of the season. We were going to have that press conference no matter what. As I said in that press conference, I was disappointed, to put it lightly, with that moment. I think when you look at leadership within the club, when you look at those things, when you look at Phil, when you look at myself, that was a tough moment. That was a tough loss and a tough moment. And I think it's on a lot of those people and some of the more important players to also take accountability as well, and you have to receive and embrace some of the difficult moments to show the others around you that we're going to persevere, we're going to get through it. So I wasn't happy with the moment and how it was handled. Look, with Evander, these contract disputes, some of these things are very, very normal throughout clubs. When they start to potentially get aired a bit more publicly, that's when then people realize a little bit more of the situation, that's unfolding. We've got a very, very talented player who's in the prime of his career. He's coming off of a season where he had a tremendous year. for us in Portland and for MLS, which vaulted him into a conversation to be seen and viewed as one of the better and more talented players that the league has last season. And he deserves all that credit and notoriety without question. I do think we've done a lot as a club to give him that platform, to put him in a position to succeed. But this is a business as well. And a player like that is always going to have big opportunities in a lot of different markets from around the world. We understand that. We know that. Long term, we do need players that want to be in Portland, want to be here, want to be committed to winning something. I think Evander's made it known that he wants to do that, but I also think it's quite clear that there's also some other opportunities that could be exciting and intriguing. And I can't necessarily fault him for that. Some of the clubs that we've spoken to in the past year, some of them are very big clubs. Some of them are great opportunities financially. We've tried very, very hard as a club to show our faith in Evander as a player and a person with the contract offers we tried to make as well. As we go through this offseason, we do have to be working with them together to have an understanding of what does it look like long term. Difficult decision, but we have to do what's best for the club. And sometimes, and you can look throughout the league, sometimes the best decisions aren't always as clear as people think. So we've got to manage that together. I think that we've done that to this point, and we'll just continue to have to do as we go through the offseason.
Somebody who has been here for the long term is Diego Chara. He'll be entering his 15th season with the club, every season in MLS. You said in your postseason press conference, if he wants to be here, there will always be a spot for him. What does it mean to have Diego signing that contract extension and coming back for the 15th MLS season, the 50th anniversary of this club since 1975, and for him to still be a presence in the group?
Yeah, it's massive, and it's rare for someone in my position, that you have an individual like that and a player like that that's had that longevity and impact and time at a club. I'm incredibly happy for him as a player and as a person. I'm incredibly happy for his family. Diego is someone that has been unbelievably unselfish throughout his career. Once again, you go back to salary cap league and how do we continue to make things work. Really, for us, it wasn't a question of, it was more just if Diego wants to continue to play, if he wants to continue to be a part of the club and part of the team, we're going to figure it out. Because for me, it's that important. For the owner, it's that important. For Phil, it's that important as well. He's still playing at a very good level. I think we have to continue to look at how do we put him in the best position to succeed? What does that role look like within our team? But his presence, his presence goes beyond what you see on the field or what you hear about him as a person. He's someone that, for me, he really identifies and defines what it is to be a Portland Timber.
Timbers 360 is presented by Toyota. Other additions to the staff specifically. In your post-season press conference, you said you guys are hiring a mental performance expert. I believe that hire has been made. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why is that important to add to the club? What does it bring to the club? And what other additions to the staff are you looking at?
Yeah, that is one that we've now explored for, probably for about a year. And how does that actually fit into our club? How is a part of what we do? We've had great conversations. There was a lot of collaboration among staff. We view the mental performance position as really being a part of performance. So when you look at the preparation that goes into training, when you look at the physical preparation, everything that happens, in terms of how are we going to perform, that is a layer. The mental performance is a layer of a part of that. We're really, really excited with that hire. It's someone I believe has persevered throughout her entire life. I think given the support and some of the other experience that we have in those areas, she's going to be poised to really make a big impact in her time at the club. I spoke a little bit in the press conference about some of the other areas that we're looking at. We are looking at a potential data analyst. How are we going to have something that ties more into our coaching staff? How are we going to look to continue to support the coaching staff to give them the tools and resources that are necessary? And we'll continue to look at what's best, for that group as well. And then as we look to move forward, I believe you got to continue to look at player support and player engagement and player care for us, and I think throughout the league as well, is something that has grown and grown and grown when you look at the level of investment in players and trying to bring players into Portland. That's one that we want to identify and ultimately hire as well, so that our players have someone that's constantly thinking about their families, thinking about how we get them settled and integrated into our club so that they can ultimately perform at their very best on the field.
Finally, 2025, we're, 3 months away or so from opening day, from the first match of that season. What's your vision for what the 2025 Portland Timbers look like?
I think there's clear things for us. We don't want to continue to start seasons in the fashion that we have. It felt like we were on a path last year to maybe build a stronger start to the season and build some confidence, momentum, so that we weren't having to chase some of those points, through the middle of the season as well. But I think it's just more and more consistency. I think it's less of those longer stretches where we're asking a lot of different questions and more just that consistent grind throughout the year and feeling confident that we're going to go on the road, we have a chance to win that game. We're going to be playing at home. There's this exciting team that's in front of the crowd, and we know that we're going to make life miserable, for the opponent that we're playing against. So I think, like I said, there's a lot of progress that we saw in these areas. We have to continue to build on that. We do need to think about how we lost that game. That has to sit in the back of our minds, more for motivation than to take away from what we did put together over a longer part of the season, and really start to look just to climb and get closer to where we want to be.
Ned, appreciate you taking the time to join us on Timbers 360. All the best this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Timbers 360 is presented by Toyota. Thanks for watching Timbers 360, presented by Toyota.